for one's tithe, you can be lenient. Okay. So yesterday we were talking about the money that you put in a pushka. We talked about the lottery, and then we talked about whether you can keep the prize from the lottery that you win from a charity. And then we talked about Ketzad Yitain Tzedakah. So now we're up to that chapter about the attitude that a person is supposed to have when giving tzedakah. Okay, so we're up to. So we talked about the psychological importance of trying to suppress any feelings of stinginess, and what? Or bad feelings when the person is rude or obnoxious or things like that. And then also when you do give tzedakah, let's say to a person, and you want to feed him, for example, you should feed him from the finest food and not from the leftovers. Okay. Yeah. All right. That was the story with story with the turkey. Okay. All right, Gimel. Asur lahachzir rekam es ha'ani hashoel. So this is a famous halacha, and we want to examine the parameters. You're not allowed to turn away a poor person who asks. You can't turn him away empty-handed. Afilu einosein lo ela rak rogeres echas. Even if all you can give him is one sticky date, or one sticky fig, I think is a grogeres. Shenemar al yashuv dach nichlam, so that because the pasuk in Tehillim says that let not the oppressed turn away humiliated. In other words, im he'ani sha'al mimenu ve'en lo lateit, but that's obviously if you have something on you to give him. But if you don't have anything to give him, lo yigarbo, you're not allowed to raise your voice or rebuke him, but rather you should speak soothingly to him, appease him. And you should just show him that you wish you could give him something, but you don't have anything to give. Okay, so that's, yeah, right. So, okay, so first of all, you have to know, we're going to see some qualifications. But certainly if you're involved in doing a mitzvah, you're not obligated to right? In other words, remember we learned the laws of, I don't know if you were here, we learned the laws of Hashavas Aveda. And one of the things we learned about the mitzvah of returning lost items is that anyone who's engaged in that mitzvah is getting a tangible benefit from working on returning the lost item. Why? Because if, let's say I found my friend's dog, found the lost dog, and I'm in the middle of feeding the dog, I don't have an obligation to go and answer my door when a poor person comes to the door. Because we have the principle of osek b'mitzvah, pater min mitzvah, and if that's true, when I'm in the middle of feeding a dog that I found that I have to return, and that's certainly true if I'm in the middle of davening, or if I'm engaged in another mitzvah. So that's certainly one point where a person is allowed to sort of either wave off or ignore a meshulach who comes in the middle of davening. And basically, just you don't have to attend to him just because he sticks his hand in front of you and shakes the coins. You don't have an obligation to do that. But there is, of course, that story with Nachum Ish Gamzu, that story where he had a horrible life of affliction. He was a multiple amputee and had terrible skin disease. And when he was asked why such a tzaddik like yourself, how did this happen? He said, well, one time I was unsaddling my donkey and a poor person came over and said, can I have some tzedakah? And he said, well, as soon as I'm finished, I'll be happy to give you something. But in the interim, that fellow dropped dead, the ani, because apparently he was pretty he was pretty emaciated or whatever it was, and the guy just and so Nachum Ish Kamzu felt so terrible that he cursed himself, and the curses came true. So the point of that story is to try and create a balance in our own minds. Yes, of course, sometimes there may be a feeling that we're, of being overwhelmed. Thank God it's not half as bad as it used to be at one point, before COVID. People haven't been coming around as much. But if we didn't place any restrictions, I think people would still be coming, and we might feel that sense of bombardment that, people have felt in the past. Even when we tell them to wait in the lobby, if a whole group of them are here at the same time, it's sort of like a bit overwhelmed. And they're, so it's always good to have small coins or those Yad Binyamin, was that what they're called? Yad Binyamin? The vouchers, yeah, to be able to give out. And that way you avoid any of these conflicts. Okay, Dalit. But indeed, if a person doesn't have what to give, because he's being approached on the street and he simply doesn't have any money in his pocket, he's not guilty of this, of doing anything wrong. Now, of course, some of these guys have card scanners now. So what do you do in that situation? What do you say? I'm sorry, I don't have anything. Oh, he pulls out his card scanner. That's right. They can do it on his phone now. Yeah. So, do you have to give him? It's if he's an ani, if he says, "Please give me, I have no food," then you should give him something. But you have to know that you're not running to do a mitzvah. If you're running to do a mitzvah and it's going to take away some time from doing your mitzvah, you can say, "I'm sorry, I can't do it now." Okay. No. Osek b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. If you're running to do a mitzvah, let's say you're running to minyan, or let's say you're running to to help with the shul's kiddush and people are waiting, or whatever it is, or you're running to babysit for your kids so your kids can go out for dinner. So you want to do a chesed for someone, right? So all of these things would qualify as a mitzvah. You're allowed to justify saying, "I'm sorry, I can't help you right now. It's not a good time." But you have to be osek b'mitzvah. You have to be involved in doing a mitzvah.
Most important things in our life.
They're not the most important things in our life. They are ma'avirin es roa hagazera. They take away the evil of the decree, which means that if a person is looking for added merit, then they should strive to do those three things. So it's a personal choice. But don't be motivated by guilt, and don't be motivated by fear of getting struck by lightning. Do what is correct in your eyes. Okay? Do what you feel Hashem would want you to do at this moment. Okay? And don't be pressured by pushy meshulachim, which usually happens to me. Okay. Ha-isr da'al yashuv dach nichlam. So this prohibition of do not turn away an oppressed person humiliated, ne'amar rak kesheha'ani balefanenu umevakesh tzedakah. It only applies when the poor man himself appears before us and is asking for tzedakah. V'lo kishemevakesh al yedei michtavu shaliach. But not when you get a solicitation by mail, or if someone who's a representative asks you for that money. So for example, there is a custom that many very righteous people have on Purim. They'll run around collecting tzedakah for poor families. I think I can't think of a more virtuous thing to do. I know a guy in LA. I know people here. They will go around on Purim from one shul to another, collecting money for families that they know need it. But it's not for them; it's for other people. But the prohibition of turning that person away doesn't apply, because he himself is not the ani. Im hagoiva shel mosad tzedakah hu ani ba'atzmo mekabel chelek me'atrumot she'osef. He says, let's say a guy's come for a yeshiva, and he himself gets a percentage of the dividend of the funds because he himself qualifies as an ani. It would seem as if he would also be in that category, which makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not only that, but let's say the guy's obnoxious. I think that's the reason why this halacha is written. Because if he's obnoxious and he says, "Stuk, nu, tzedakah, tzedakah," how do you, right? Right. Now, this is an excellent question. What if the reason the person's poor is because they simply did not have a good life plan, right? You know, I sometimes meet shluchei mitzvah who grew up in English-speaking countries, whether they're from England or from the U.S. or from Canada, and these are people that came to Eretz Yisrael when they were yeshiva bachurim and had the most idealistic of objectives. They learned in Kollel, they got married, and they lived an Israeli life. And now they're poor. They're trying to make weddings, trying to pay for medical expenses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They had no life plan. They had no investments. They had no financial advisor, and as a result, they are going around collecting tzedakah. Now, do they qualify as an ani? Yes, they qualify as an ani. Am I allowed to refuse them because I'm upset that they are draining the Jewish community simply because they didn't have a good life plan? No, I can't use that as my argument. I can tell them, although it's not a nice thing to say, I don't think I would say it to him to his face. Go back to the Rosh Yeshiva who told you that this is the life plan that you should make for yourself, and have him provide for you. Because a lot of times these Rosh Yeshiva, right, said, have bitachon in Hashem, and Hashem will take care of you. Oh, so I'm Hashem, right? In other words, you're coming to me because your Rosh Yeshiva told you 40 years ago, don't worry, everything will work out fine. And now you have to run around the world and collect tzedakah. It's unfortunate, but there were many people, idealistic and very, very black and white, listened to their Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, don't worry, the Eibishter helfen, and all will be fine. And there was no financial plan. So I feel sorry for those people, but does that give me an excuse not to give them because they were stupid? No, I still have a chiyuv to give them. You can't use the backstory of a poor person to say you made poor choices in your life, and that's why you are where you are. It is what it is. You have those too. Yeah. Yeah.
Should give those kinds of people more.
Maybe. In other words, and then it goes to, well, how much do you give a person like that? So you have to that's a judgment. There's no requirement for you to give a large amount to a person who you feel is in his current situation because he just didn't have a good life plan. But you still have to give him something. He still qualifies as an ani. Right. So if a person says they're an ani, you have to believe them. Unless you have a reason to disbelieve them, you have and there is no reason to disbelieve them, but because who in their right mind would travel around the world begging for money?
Well, I mean, it waiting for is able to afford the flight from Israel to Canada to come and ask for the money. I mean, how much?
Well, that's the cost of doing business. This is their business is to beg for money, and it's going to cost them, let's say, $1,500 to do it. And it's a good investment. I mean, if I was begging and I was going to go, I can't imagine. It's such a horrible thing to have to do. I wouldn't wish it upon anybody. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy to have that person become a beggar. But to go begging for money, you'll end up making much more than the $1,500 in a generous community like Toronto. And then we'll go to Montreal, and then we'll go to New York, and then we'll go to New Jersey, and then Florida. And, they end up going around. And they'll end up making, they'll make a nice sum, and then they'll go back. So it's now a lot of times, and then there's another issue, Doug, that you're also raising, which is what if the social pressures in Israel are that I have to buy my child an apartment, right? Which I don't see too much anymore. Is it still going on? Because the costs have gone so way up that it's no longer, I mean, for a lot of these guys, it's no longer feasible for them to buy property in Israel. So what if that's the social pressure? And I don't agree with that. I don't agree that everyone should have to buy an apartment for their kids. Yeah. Is that considered, do they qualify as an ani because they have to buy an apartment for their kids? They don't have enough money. Does that qualify them as an ani? I'm not so sure that qualifies them as an ani. Okay. Next. Hey. No, thank you. No, thank you.
Whether the wedding or whether it's close, don't think you should come. You should come with a note and say, I'm here on this. Collect. Yeah, it doesn't say. I always said it.
It usually, a lot of times it'll say Mr. So-and-so is a father of a large family, and he's trying to cover the expenses of his children, their wedding and so forth. But it doesn't tell you what those expenses are. What if he's coming because he wants to raise 500,000 shekels or 1,000,000 shekels to purchase an apartment for his kids, which he's entitled to, but that doesn't necessarily qualify him as an ani. Yeah. Okay.
Three of them come to, let's say here, your priority is the here's something to give. Who do you give to? That's the first time ever served.
Well, if they're all coming at the same time, probably it's best to say, guys, I don't have any change. Divide this among yourselves. Yeah. If you can influence other people to give tzedakah, your reward is even greater than the one who actually gave the tzedakah. We have some people in our community who are very good at that. They're very, and look, the reward is even greater than the actual giver, to be able to fundraise for a charity. Shmona milus yesh b'tzedakah. there are 8 different levels of charity giving. Zula Maila Mizu, each one is higher than the other. Amaila Agdola Biyoser Shein La Maila Mimenu, the highest level of tzedakah is Hamachzik Biyad Yisrael Hamach V'nosen Lo Matana O Halva. He says, if you support a Jew who is poor by either giving him a gift or lending him money, O Osa Imo Shutfus, or going into partnership with him so that he can benefit from some kind of business venture, Omamsi Lo Malacha Kedei Lechazek Yado, V'lo Yitztarech Lebrios V'lo Yishal, or you help him with some kind of work that he's trying to succeed in so that you try to support him and that he doesn't need other people to give him tzedakah. In other words, the best way is to support him so that he doesn't coming to have to beg. If you can find a way, find a job for him, find something for him so that he doesn't become a beggar. And about such a person, it says, you shall support him or strengthen him is really, I guess, the more correct. So if a person was going to use that argument, he would say, let me give all of my tzedakah money to the Jewish Free Loan Society, to a gemach that make free loans, right? Because if it's a higher level of tzedakah to lend someone money so that they don't have to beg, right? So maybe I should give all of my money to a free loan society. So comes along this halacha and says, no, you should give generously to a free loan. This is from quoting the Shevet HaLevi. You should be generous in giving to a free loan society, but don't give more than half of your tzedakah money to a free loan, because you also want to be able to give tzedakah to a need. But you see, I mean, look at that. That's a huge percentage. Our shul set up an account with the Jewish Free Loan. A lot of people don't realize that that's actually the most dignified way of helping people in need. There are many people who are too proud to accept charity, but they will accept the loan. And we've had that. I've had people come to me from the community. God forbid I would ever take a penny from somebody else as tzedakah, but a loan, I am willing to take because I plan to pay it all back. So if you can do that, I encourage each and every one of you, anyone who's listening, to give money to a gemach, to a free loan society. There is the Toronto Jewish Free Loan Society. You can always contact them and say, I'd like to give money to the Buy It Fund, and use some of your Meiser money for that. I think it's a very, very virtuous thing to do. And I got involved in it. And there's another gemach that's run by private individuals in our shul. I don't know whether they need that, they've never asked me to fund it. I think they fund it from outside funding. But I think but the reason why I started, and I actually personally started this gemach, a guy that I know, a guy named Aaron Abacassis, who lives in LA but is from Toronto, pushed me to get it started. And that he's like, this is his thing, right? But he's right, because the fact is that it's something that we should encourage everyone to do. It's a very high level of tzedakah.
For the loan.
Well, yeah.
I just guarantee it.
Well, you're acting as a guarantor, but it costs you nothing out of pocket. What you're doing is, unless they default, yeah. Absolutely. If they default on the loan and you have to pay, then it's absolutely tzedakah, and you're getting much more than you bargained for. I mean, you're giving much more than you bargained for in that situation. You're doing a mitzvah of vehechezakta bo. That's the mitzvah of show support for another Jew. It may many times vehechezakta bo can be fulfilled without giving any money at all. Let's say I know a guy is starting a new business and he could use the support. So my letting other people know, hey, you should really support this guy in his new business is also the mitzvah v'hechazak. Didn't cost me a penny. I just put it on a big WhatsApp group and said, everyone please support this guy. He's part of our community. He just opened a light bulb store or whatever he opened, and you should support him. Even if you can get your light bulbs from Amazon, buy your light bulbs from this guy. Yeah, giving him advice, but also qualifying. Tell him, you know what, maybe a light bulb store is not the way to go in today's economy. Yeah. Right. When you act as a co-signer, there are certain people that I wouldn't advise you to co-sign for. In other words, no, seriously, I would say, like, there's a certain person who asked me to be a co-signer, but I happen to know that he defaulted on a bunch of loans in the past. I wouldn't sign for him. And when someone asked me, I said, absolutely do not sign for this guy. He's not good. He's not good for the money.
Tell somebody they ask you.
You're mechuyev to tell someone. Yeah, you're mechuyev to tell someone if it's a bad shit. Yeah, we're getting it.
That's the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's the highest level of tzedakah of the hechazak tavo. And sometimes you can fulfill it without spending any money, like you said, Ron, like acting as a cosign. Pachos mizeh, anosein tzedakah la'ani v'lo yada lami nosein v'lo yada ha'ani mimi mekabel. The next highest level of tzedakah is when you give, but you don't know who's receiving, and the recipient doesn't know who gave. That's the next highest level, because it's totally anonymous on both sides. The karov lazeh hanosin l'kupa shel tzedakah, and so when you put money in the pushka, right, and it goes into the charity account at the shul, which is what everyone does when they put money in the pushka here in the shul. That money doesn't go to the shul, the pushka money. I don't know why we don't publicize it more, but we should. When you put money in the pushka in the shul, it goes to the shul's charity fund. I think minus a small percentage, like for administration of the fund. I can't tell you for sure. A lot of shuls have two pushkas. One says for the Beis HaKnesses, and the other one says for the Aniyim. But in the Bayit in particular, which I think is very impressive, the money that's collected from the pushka does not go to the shul. I'm not sure whether that policy should change or not. I think we should really probably have two pushkas, and one should say there should be a sign on one that it's for the Beis, because there are a lot of people who don't pay membership, and they think by putting money daily in the pushka, they're yotzei. So maybe that was the reason why we didn't.
On the bunch, we're 9. 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Rosh Chodesh account goes to the poor, goes to the charity fund, which I control, and I use to make distributions 3 times a year, plus other distributions as needed. But I generally give it I give a distribution before Rosh Hashanah, before Purim, and before Pesach. Yeah. And then as needed, because there may be needs that come up in the middle of the year. Okay. Oh, okay. Time to go. We'll